It's a normal biological process. It does reduce your resilience, namely your ability to respond to a trip or inactivity. But aging by itself is not a major problem until the late 90s. We now know that people who are 80 can improve their strength, stamina, supple skill. They can still reduce the risk of a stroke and dementia. So it's great. So brisk walking is the key. Preferably it's better in a green environment, better with other people. And I'm also a great believer in walking for purpose, raising money for the Wildlife Trust, for example. But it's brisk walking is the simplest way to keep your heart and lungs and reduce your risk of type 2 diabetes, high blood pressure, heart disease, and the disease we fear most, dementia. So that's the walking. It's a very simple thing to do.
What if part of the cure for many of our modern health problems was as simple as putting one foot in front of the other? This week, I'm joined by Sir Muir Gray, a pioneer in public health and prevention, whose career spans decades of work in the NHS and beyond. At 80, Muir is still leading from the front, championing revolution in how we think about ageing, activity, and self-care. In this episode, we explore the powerful role of walking, not just as gentle exercise, but as daily medicine, a form of resistance against inactivity, isolation, and even disease. We dive into Muir's concept of the 4 S's: strength, stamina, suppleness, and skill, and why they matter more than ever as we age. We also talk about his personal experience of a heart attack and how that revealed the urgent need for change in how healthcare addresses movement and recovery. This isn't just a conversation about aging, it's about living better at any age, and why, when it comes to health, it's never too late to make a difference. Muir, you are a renowned public health expert, and you're best known probably for your transformative work in the NHS in the UK, the National Health Service. And you've long advocated for preventative healthcare, healthy aging, and physical activity, particularly. And that's part of the reason that you are coming on today. We actually met at the Smart Aging Summit last year, and I was really fascinated by your talk. Tell us a bit about some of the main areas of your work over the years, and how you see that your message is key, particularly in the context of working within public health.
Well, I'm a very experienced public health professional. Remembering Oscar Wilde said, "Experience the name you give your mistakes." So I'm a very experienced public health professional. I've done many things over the years. I set up all the national screening programs, and I developed the idea of a national library for health, that sort of thing. Mostly about getting knowledge into practice. I'm not a researcher, and I've been working in public health since 1972 in what was the county borough of Oxford. And I've done many different things, but I've had a long-standing interest in aging, because when I started, I found that no one even knew how many people there were over 60 in the city of Oxford. There were all these doctors looking at healthy children, but no one was thinking about population aging, which I could see was a rising topic. So I've had that interest running through my professional career. And I've also been very interested in activity, partly because one of my principles is to be where the action isn't. Competition is less hard, so everyone was into diet, but no one was looking at activity. And partly because of my mum, who was a gym teacher in the toughest schools in Glasgow. And on her badge from Dunfermline College of Physical Education was written Physical Education and Hygiene. It was a health service, 1928. I don't know what it says in the badge now. So I've always been very influenced by activity and the need to promote activity. And that led really to the development of we say we'll be launching it again in the summit this year, the elixir of life. We understand what is happening to us as we live longer. Aging is not a cause of major problems until the 90s. It's a normal biological process. It does reduce your resilience, namely your ability to respond to a trip or inactivity. But aging by itself is not a major problem until the late 90s. And one of our team is age 90. He was 90 on Sunday, and he's planning to run a marathon when he's 100. The second factor,
and he's actually been on the podcast. So
good.
Look a few episodes back if you're listening, because it's a fascinating story of running late in life.
He's our guinea pig. He's our very cool guinea pig. And then the second issue that takes place is lots of fitness. And that takes place for most people from about 20 on because of the chair. The chair. And I'm trying to get sitting recognized as an occupational hazard like radiation. Because we're not genetically designed to sit all the time with calories all around us. The third factor is disease. But most of the diseases, like sitting, are also caused by our social and physical environment, not by our genes.
Yeah.
And then the fourth factor is the social environment in which we live. Too many people still suffering from deprivation and housing problems, and everyone affected by ageism. So that's our elixir of life. And movement and activity, physical, cognitive, and emotional, are key to living longer, better.
Superb. An amazing summary, and from all angles. And if I may, you personally, in your personal life, you have experienced sort of both sides of health. You've publicly stated that about 12 years ago you suffered from a heart attack.
Yep.
Tell me what you've learned, because obviously from that we all learn a huge deal from moments in life like that. I personally had chronic pain for 4 years, and it absolutely changed the landscape of my life and drove me to do the work I now do. So tell me a little bit about that experience for you, but also particularly the discussion around medication as well, and your thoughts on what we prescribe to people who get into these situations and helping them recover.
Well, I've lots of health problems. I had polio when I was 7, in 1951, and I suffer from a disease called CLAB. I went to see my doctor to get some antibiotics for my chest infection, and they said, tell me about your health. I said, well, I've got CLAB. And he looked at his computer screen a bit puzzled. CLAB. I said, yeah, it's coughing like a bastard. Everyone in Glasgow had it who grew up before the Clean Air Act. So I suffer with CLAB. And then I've got heart and vascular problems. And perhaps the striking thing, really, for me that has stimulated me to do what I'm doing is in the 12 years since my heart attack, I've had 400 boxes of pills, and I take 7 pills a day, but not one word from the NHS about diet or exercise. Not one word. But we're introducing digital activity prescriptions, and these will be prepared automatically. By the time a GP's typed METF for the word metformin, because a person got type 2 diabetes, an activity prescription will be prepared telling you about the local park run, park walks, health walks, dance studios, other activities, and also mental activities for people who are depressed. 8 million people are on antidepressants. So we're launching this in Hertfordshire, and it's all been approved by the NHS. So hopefully by next year, everyone will be getting activity prescriptions. The GP doesn't need to know anything or do anything. Very good if they can encourage the person, but the GPs don't have time to go into the details of how you become more active mentally and physically. So that's what I've learned. And the important point there is that self-care is the most important type of care for prevention and for living well with a long-term condition. The NHS is very important for diagnosis, for acute care, and for starting the right treatment. But for living well with long-term conditions, self-care and informal care, buddy care from other people with the same problem. So that's what I've learned over the years from personal experience.
Yeah, and that self-advocacy, it can be very hard when there's obviously a lack of awareness of what you can do Hence the reason for podcasts like this, the public health messaging that you try to get out there, all the work that you do. But the issue is still that it comes down to the individual to really understand. So if we go back to prior to having something happen to you, how key, particularly as we age, it is to think about prevention. And sadly, often it's not the case until something happens that we really think about prevention. So beyond treating an individual, how do you think that as a healthcare system and the general public, we get people to take prevention more seriously?
Well, I think we have to look at the new world in which we live. The first healthcare revolution was the public health revolution, clean, clear water. The second healthcare revolution was the high-tech revolution of the last 50 years, which has been wonderful. Hip replacement, chemotherapy, for example. But we're now in the third healthcare revolution, driven by citizens, knowledge, and this.
Yeah.
And what we're looking at is, firstly, I think people need a contract at the age of 18, telling them the facts of life and what they can do. And then I think we should send people a birthday card. Certainly every 10 years, 20, 30, 40. And then, as you know, I've written a book called Sod 60, and then my book for people 70s, 80s, and 90s. They should be getting a wake-up call saying, well, you're 80, but we now know that people who are 80 can improve their strength, stamina, supple, skill. They can still reduce the risk of a stroke and dementia. So it's great.
Yeah.
But really, you are the key person. And we're actually using the word partner now for people, and as opposed to patients. So if someone's got diabetes or high blood pressure, they're partners. We're a part of the NHS. We'll do this, but actually, you're a partner, and here's what you could do. So
I love that. Then it makes it a team effort.
Yeah, team effort. That's just I'll use that word too. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And we all need help with accountability. We all need to have our hand held through certain things to become aware, but also to get us going. Motivation is something that we often will struggle to keep us going. And as you've said at the beginning, in this modern world where everything is set up for heightened comfort, for increased convenience, it means that everything has to be a choice. It's harder to make ourselves make that choice. But when we're aware how important that choice is, and also I think just to bring in my work a little bit, how simple those choices can be, that actually it doesn't need to be about running the marathons at 70. It doesn't need to be going to a gym and feeling intimidated and in a world that perhaps it is not where you really comfortably sit. It can be all about how you create small pockets of movement every day. And one of the reasons that I've got you on right now is because May is National Walking Month, which every year I celebrate by fundraising, by walking every day, clocking up my miles. And it's not about the mileage. It's because some days it's a walk to the post box. And that's what I advocate, is that every small piece of movement, and in the form of walking, if you can, is beneficial. Every piece counts. And you are a huge advocate of walking, and you have just written a wonderful book called Dr. Gray's Walking Cure. Do you want to show the cover now? Have you got it there as well?
Yeah, it just arrived yesterday, so I couldn't send you a copy, but I will, of course, send you a copy. And
amazing.
Yeah. And
so tell us about it. Tell us first of all about why you've chosen to write this specific book out of all your books.
Well, again, it's about activity, but I found that people were unclear about the word fitness, and I tend to use my 4 S's: strength, stamina, suppleness, skill. And the book talks about walking plus. So walking by itself is very good for stamina, for keeping your heart and lungs and the oxygen flowing very well. And it's good for strength of the lower legs. But there are these other issues of suppleness, skill and coordination, and strength of the upper body. So they need a daily dozen, 12 minutes a day of that. But the evidence is very strong that we need to take 30 minutes of exercise of what's called moderate intensity. And that means that you can hear breath a bit more quickly. If I was on the phone to you, as I usually do my telephone when I'm walking, you could hear my breath a little bit more quickly, but you can still carry on a conversation. High intensity is also good if you can do it, and there you can't have a conversation. So moderate intensity is brisk walking, and the aim is to do 30 minutes of brisk walking at least 5 days a week. And there's something called the Active 10 app, the NHS Active 10 app, and it's actually very good at measuring the minutes of brisk walking. And you see, I've done 8 minutes this morning. I had to walk quite quickly to get back to see you at 10 o'clock. But you can build it up, 2, 3 minutes, 5 minutes. So brisk walking is the key. Preferably, it's better in a green environment, better with other people. And I'm also a great believer in walking for purpose, raising money for the Wildlife Trust, for example. But it's brisk walking is the simplest way to keep your heart and lungs and reduce your risk of type 2 diabetes, high blood pressure, heart disease, and the disease we fear most, dementia. So that's the walking.
Yeah.
It's a very simple thing to do.
And the focus on brisk is a good one, because I think a lot of people who are out walking can tend to sort of wander a little bit and think that that's enough, and it's certainly not a bad thing because they're out walking, and that's great. There's so many benefits of doing that, but brisk is absolutely key, as you say, for getting a higher level of benefit. What I love as well about what you've just said is that you've done 8 minutes earlier in the day. You'll probably do another 8 minutes at some other point in the day, and maybe another 8 minutes later on. And I think there's a huge issue around fitness messaging, especially sadly, as humans, we sort of like to take simple messages from things. And when that public health message is how much you need to do in a day, people then see that as a big task, and it's a one-off stint that has to be done in one go. And therefore they see the barrier of,
Right.
Well, how am I going to fit that in? And yet actually those small chunks added together are, to my mind, they're just as important, but sometimes it's an even better way, because then you are less likely to be more sedentary the rest of the day. You're splitting up movement throughout the day, sprinkling it through the day, which will make you feel so much better at the end of the day. But you're probably more likely to actually do a bit more than you would if you'd gone out on one walking session. Would you agree?
Yes, I do all my phoning walking. I did 2 phone calls during that 8 minutes. And so I've got another 25 minutes to go. Because the recommendation, you do 30 minutes. But remember what I said about aging, it reduces your resilience. So I did 31 minutes in my 60s, 32 minutes in my 70s, and now I'm in my 80s, I'm doing 33 minutes. So every year you've got to do a little bit more.
Absolutely. Just taking a quick pause because I want to tell you about a new offer exclusively for listeners of this podcast. If you'd like to improve your mobility, strength, and learn more about moving well in daily life now and to train for your 90s, come and move with me in the Reclaim Movement membership. There's weekly live coaching in term time with hundreds of replays available, as well as hordes of 5 and 10 minute mini movement videos to follow throughout your day. I'm offering you a 15% discount on your first month's membership on top of the 7-day free trial. Go to reclaimmovement.co.uk/membership to create your account and quote the code podcast15. Let's move together to feel better and keep doing all the things you love. I'm doing a talk on aging next week, and that the messages, the common narrative that we have in society about aging and slowing down, almost the necessity to slow down, are really doing us a disservice.
Yes.
Often they are meant in jest as well. We say things flippantly, but those flippant comments about sort of slowing down and so on really just do us a disservice. They demotivate us, because actually it's the opposite. Tell me a little bit more about the S's, and how out with walking. So your walking plus, how you share that people who are aging can achieve the 4 S's.
Well, we think of the stamina, that's pretty well dealt with by brisk walking, but it could be swimming or tennis or lots of other ways of doing it. Then there are other types of activity. Dance, for example. I'm working with Angela Rippon, and she's launched Let's Dance, and that's very good for really all 4 aspects. Very good for coordination. In terms of skill, walking on rough ground is better than walking, and most pavements are pretty rough these days, so that's good. I stand on one leg for 2 minutes when I'm brushing my teeth. The toothbrush timer is very helpful in doing that. So that's skill. The suppleness, I think we're seeing now much better understanding of suppleness, and yoga, tai chi, Pilates, those have entered pretty general conversation. And I say to people in 50s and 60s, why don't you give your mum or dad a Pilates lesson or a tai chi lesson for their birthday instead of wine or chalkies? And then the one that interests me a lot is strength, because I think that's been the most neglected. Strength has got the sort of image of bodybuilding, of men bodybuilding. But we now know that the loss of muscle that takes place, which increases your risk of falling and affects quality of life, is largely due to inactivity. Osteoporosis and sarcopenia are the fancy medical names that doctors have given to your bones getting thinner and your muscles getting weaker because of inactivity. So we're launching now a major focus on strength. So I'm speaking to pharmacists. Why don't they start selling weights? Why don't we give out resistance bands to people? And I always remind people that sugar is very good for you, providing you leave it in the 1 kilogram bag, and you have one beside you on each side and stand up 10 times when the ads come on television. So strength, I think, is the area I'm going to be working most on in the next year or so. The walking for stamina, I'll obviously be doing that, but people get that message quite easily. But the concept of strength for women in their 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s is, at the moment, is not seen. It's not discussed or thought about. I don't know. I mean, yeah, I know what you're promoting helps with that, but I think it's a major public education, including the medical profession, in thinking about strength.
Yeah, and it's particularly critical immediately after the menopause. In the first 10 years after the menopause, that's when the biggest sort of downward shift happens due to the lack of hormones. And hence that's why it's a really good time if it's not been something you've done before. And I think that the problem is that weights are associated with gyms. Gyms are great places if that's somewhere that you're happy to be. But it doesn't have to be the sort of big dumbbell that you see. I think to get started, my mum, who's 80, now gets out of bed in the morning, does a short movement session, and she puts on ankle and wrist weights that are just wrapped around. So she's not even having to lift anything particularly. She has arthritis in her hands, so it's harder. But then she's just adding on that bit of extra weight. And quite frankly, you could do that and just walk around the house, and it's going to add on a bit of benefit. And so I think thinking out of the box from the sort of traditional fitness, I have to go to a gym and do 10 reps. And as you say, the sort of bag of sugar on the side, maybe that wouldn't necessarily trigger you to lift it. But, if you put a weight there of some kind, it would certainly stand out, and it might just make you think while you're boiling the kettle or whatever, what can I do with that? So yeah, no, it's absolutely key. And and obviously aging is something that you've talked about from the perspective of earlier in the conversation, that it's inevitable, but at the same time it's more about deconditioning.
Yeah.
And I think if you can talk to us a little bit more about what you see that sort of difference is, and how walking helps that, and how movement in general, covering your 4 S's, is possible, and how that counteracts that. Because I think people really just see aging as deconditioning that you can do nothing about.
Well, I'd say you have to understand that aging does have an impact. Is it actually got two impacts? One is loss of maximum mobility, for example, the maximum pulse rate goes down. The second is the loss of resilience, the ability to respond when you're asked to do something like go up 3 flights of stairs or run half a mile. Now, fitness has got two features. One is loss of maximum mobility, and the second is loss of resilience. So actually, that's why the medical profession has confused these two things until very, very recently. But we now know that much of what happens that we've said is due to the aging process is due to loss of fitness, loss of the fitness ability. So the way I describe it is that there's a period of life where you go up to a maximum, maybe at 23, and then it's downhill all the way. But the best possible rate of decline is much slower than the actual rate of decline. And this is the fitness gap. And this is what we've got to close, which we can close at any age. Now, when you get disease, sometimes the best possible rate of decline accelerates. So I lost some heart muscle, for example. But often the fitness gap opens wider, faster, because fitness is lost. Because your son comes to see you and sees you're having difficulty walking, so he orders Ocado to come instead of going to the shops. So that accelerates the fitness loss. So these are the facts of life 2.0. That's what I'm giving a talk. And I give the same talk to the medical profession as I would to a women's institute or a mosque or a bridge club. The facts of life 2.0.
And when you give that I love that. And when you give that kind of a talk to medical professionals, I know it will be incredibly well received by non-medical professionals because you explain things so clearly. But what about when it's to medical professionals? Do you get any kind of resistance? How do they respond to that?
Oh, but I'm very cunning. I say to them, look, I know you know all this, but I'm just telling you what we're saying to old people. And then I give them the talk.
Flattery. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then all that we've been talking about then really is about your mindset about aging then.
Yes.
It's about how
it's ageism.
You see. Yeah. And how you see what's possible. And I know in my talk next week, there's been a study, I cannot remember the name for the life of me, where people who see aging more positively and sort of how that can be for them can live up to 7.5 years longer than those who don't, purely because that then makes them become more active because they feel more capable. They see opportunities, they take them. And they try things. They continue to try things. Continue to be curious about what their body and mind is capable of. And I can absolutely see that as being the case, because if you feel like you're a victim to aging, then you are likely to slow down. You are likely to do less. So what do you think are sort of some of the most damaging myths about aging?
I think it's confusion, really, and I don't even like the word aging better, because we can't influence aging. That's why we call it live longer better. So a lot of it to do with language. Language creates reality. That's what the anthropologists teach us. So we need to be very clear what we mean about aging, fitness, disease, and social factors. So a lot of it is actually it's confusion. That people are confused about what is happening to us, which means that learning is a key feature of living longer better. And I've been working with an Oxford group called Learning with Experts to develop a learning program, which I believe should be given to everyone probably about the age of 55 when they're doing their retirement planning. We've changed the name of retirement to Renaissance, by the way. And they should be given to, because we're just starting, I think everyone needs a learning program. And the NHS should be giving them a learning program as to what the hell is happening. What the hell is happening to me? That's the key question. And we haven't addressed that. And I'm afraid the medical profession is very confused too. They mix up the words dementia and Alzheimer's disease, for example. So in Oxford, we know that the language is key, the Oxford English Dictionary. So we've got a dictionary of living longer better with the key terms set out. And I need to be given the opportunity to rewire the brains of people. It should be training and learning. And learning is the way of consuming the elixir of life, which is knowledge. So that's our plan.
And then that dispels fear. And I think a lot of inactivity comes from fear, because there's this sort of myth that because there is inevitable decline in bones and muscles, that you have to treat yourself more sensitively, do less because of your fear of falling, which is absolutely valid. But actually it's the opposite that's true, because to be more resilient, to be less likely to fall, we need to be doing your 4 S's. And that takes perhaps a little bit of courage if that's not been in your life before, if you've not been someone who's been a big mover, but understanding that is key, is the way forward. And so it is a bit of a reversal, isn't it, of the communication of that narrative in society about what's needed. And yet, we see people around us. I regularly pass a lady who, when I'm walking up near Oxford Brooks and out on the track over there, that I'm pretty sure she's in her late 80s, and she runs past with a cheerful smile every time. And, people may say, oh gosh, look at her form because she's hunched over. And I just smile at her every time and say, well done, because she keeps going.
Yeah.
And because she keeps going, she looks so much younger than she is. And the look in her face of joy that she's moving, it's examples like that I just think we need to talk more about in society, because I think they're seen as sort of the odd ones out, and yet they're the ones who've got it. They've got it right.
Yeah, but I want you to stop her and do an interview with her.
I keep meaning to. Do you know what? I keep meaning to sort of pluck up the courage. I know I need to, because people, and that's when sort of social media and so on is really good. So just to give you a little story. So we were talking before about Sir Chris Ball coming on the podcast that I met through the Aging Summit and that you work with closely. And he did his, I don't know if you remember, he did his get up from the ground technique, and he allowed me to video him. And I put that on, I asked for permission, and I put that on social media. And the response was huge, because he looked so determined as well. And it was all about that determination to get off the ground without using his hands, that was so well responded to. And we get inspired by things like that. We really do. And we can see that it's possible, that he's not superhuman. He's absolutely the same as everyone else. He's just got drive and determination. A little segue there. So we're going back to, so your prescription, one of your prescriptions is this walking being a miracle cure. And that's as a preventative, but also alongside medication. And let's hope by next year that is absolutely enforced, because that's a wonderful initiative. What about the other side of the coin? Because deprescribing medication is something that I know rarely happens, because once you get on a medication, you sort of feel more comfortable that you're on it because it's helping potentially a difficult long-term chronic condition. But it's very rare that someone helps you to try to come off that medication. What are your thoughts on deprescribing medication?
Well, we sometimes call it represcribing. So it's moving from drug therapy to non-drug therapy.
Okay.
And the Department of Health itself has said 10% of all the prescriptions do no good, and 20% of hospital admissions of people aged 65 or over have drug side effects in some part, playing some part in hospital admissions. So this is something we have to take seriously in the NHS, and of course with public understanding too. So I'd say we're at an early stage now, but with Live Longer Better, this is going to be one of our key themes. And I'm also arguing for some of the resources, money, to be switched from drug therapy to non-drug therapy. So in a village, for example, if there was nothing going on, could we find a trainer or Tai Chi teacher or a yoga teacher to do something either in the village hall or with the Women's Institute, the Bowls Club, and the Bridge Club? So start to think of how do we get out there and do things which are, and people say, well, only half the people will respond, but at the moment, nothing is happening. So that's our plan,
Yeah.
to move from drugs alone, and I take 7 drugs a day and I never miss, but it's drug and non-drug therapy. That's what we're doing.
Yeah. Oh, that's great to hear. Absolutely great to hear. Because drugs are absolutely essential in many people's lives to keep them alive. But it's the lifestyle prescription that you talk about that alongside that is absolutely key. So, if people are unsure about where to start, let's just take walking, because this is, your wonderful book that would be really useful. Apart from the first step being to get your book, to get to learn and listen and read. But what would you say the first step is for them to get out the door? Because I think sometimes that whole first step is actually the hardest step of all. And once you're going, you don't look back. But the motivation to take that first step and then try to be consistent with that is the hardest. So what advice would you give people?
Firstly, download the NHS Active 10 app on the phone. It's called Active 10, and it's freely available. It measures brisk walking very well, the Active 10 app. And secondly, just get started, and probably do it with a friend or family member to start off with. So just start, but build up to 30 minutes a day, 5 days a week. Just get going.
5 days a week. Okay. Yeah. And so you've talked about your daily movement routine. Do you do anything apart from walking in your day that covers the S's?
Yeah, I do 12 minutes, my daily dozen for suppleness, skill, and strength. So a mixture of exercises, and I've got 2 5-kilogram weights, and that's just on the landing in the morning.
So easy to do, and obviously you're on your way down the stairs, so you have to stop because you see that's your place. Is that right?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. For my father as well, it is the stairs, because the stairs are part of it. So he can't go down in the morning without having done that mini workout. Good. That is it's so beneficial. Good. So tell me, you've talked a bit about where you're going with your work in public health and your work in longevity particularly. What are your plans for the book, and how are you going to be promoting that and getting that out there into the hands of those who need it?
Well, I'd say the NHS is going to adopt Live Longer Better, www.livelongerbetter.uk. And Brilliant. We see a lot of this happening at what's called neighbourhood level. General practice is changing. The practice size is getting much bigger. People retire. They can't find a principal. So I'm meeting very good GPs who say, oh yeah, my practice size is 40,000 because they've taken it over. So it's at that local level, really. And even in cities, there's a thing called neighbourhood. So we're starting this movement with neighbourhoods and communities. That's the way we're going to go.
And individuals can also get involved in that as well?
Oh, certainly. Well,
if they want to start something?
Well, you see, this park walk is starting this Saturday, as well as park run, and it's all run by volunteers. Now, we've reached the limits of thinking just employing more doctors and nurses is going to solve the problems that we face. We have, as individuals and communities, we have to take action ourselves. That's the fourth healthcare revolution. It's not just the internet, it's the rediscovery of communities.
Absolutely. And as we know, one of the biggest issues that our nations suffer at the moment is isolation and loneliness. That's a huge epidemic that wasn't helped by COVID, obviously. Nope. And yet to be able to get out there, meet new people, share time, share space. And I always say that one of the best things for that, if you're slightly intimidated, is walking, because you don't need to look anyone in the eye.
No.
You can just look ahead and take your time and space. It's so much less intense, hence why it's always been a good thing for me and teenagers. so that it's easier to administer, as it were. So if someone, and in your final thoughts, if someone was to say, or if they feel that it's a bit too late for them to make changes in their life, at whatever age, what would you say to them?
The scientific evidence is that it is never too late to influence what's happening to us. Never too late. And actually, the later it is, the bigger the benefit you can get, because there's more to recover. And by increasing activity, physical and mental, you can get back to a place you were 5 or even 10 years before. It's rejuvenation. You can get younger by becoming more active. So go for it.
Go for it. Thank you so much for coming. And if everyone will be taking a lot from what you've said, it's always really useful to have an expert who particularly has been working in the field of healthcare, but interestingly isn't actually a physician themselves, because you have such a lovely, broad, objective view on things. And what I hugely admire is that you are 81, is that right?
80,
nearly 81, not sure. 80, and you're as passionate and curious about your topic, I'm sure now, as you were at any point in your career, and I hugely respect that, and I hope that's going to be me as well. So thank you so much for the work that you do. You're so passionate, and everyone who is interested, grab. I'll be linking the link to your book in the show notes, so that people can use that as inspiration to get going for National Walking Month. But thank you so much for your time, for coming on the podcast.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you. Bye-bye.
I hope you've enjoyed listening, and if you have, you can help by doing 3 things. First, press the follow button to tell podcast platforms you want to listen again. Second, please give the show a 5-star rating and leave a review about why you liked it. And third, I'd love you to share it with friends and family or on your socials, for which I'm truly thankful. Finally, if this podcast is making you want to start reclaiming your own movement, join me in the Reclaim Movement membership for classes, both live and by replay, and countless videos of mini movement breaks to add into your daily life, covering practical and fun, important natural movements. Visit reclaimmovement.co.uk/membership to get started with your 7-day free trial. See you for the next episode, and thank you so much for listening.